Today, I'm doing a special edition of my podcast of the Leadership Room to honor the life of my grandmother. She passed away a couple weeks ago at the age of 92 and a half. She was an incredible lady. My family loved her. My kids loved her. My wife loved her. My extended family loved her. If you were at the funeral, the words that were spoken about her life and the impact she had on our grandkids and our kids, generational impact that will be felt for years to come. She left an incredible legacy. So I think there are a lot of lessons in her life, and I feel like it would be helpful if I got to tell you a little bit about the lessons that I learned from my grandmother, and hopefully I can make it through this without falling apart. But she was an incredible lady, and I think there are a lot of lessons in her life that I think are worth discussing. And so this is a special edition of the podcast. I hope my kids listen to this one day. I think if anything, this podcast episode comes across in the near term or long term, I hope that my kids hear it and they realize that their grandmother was really special. So here are the 11 valuable lessons from my grandmother. First is happiness is a choice. My grandma went to bed late. She woke up entirely too early, worked all day, yet was always smiling, brimming with joy. Amazing. She dealt with a lot of hard things, including the death of her beloved husband, the sudden death of her son-in-law in a car accident, and the loss of her daughter to cancer, the same daughter who was married to the son-in-law who died a few years earlier. But she was always happy. Choosing happiness on a day-to-day basis in the midst of life's storms may be the most important lesson she left for us. Her ultimate joy was in her Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. She longed for her heavenly home, and now she's gotten it. Secondly, kindness goes a long way. She cared for everyone she came across. It was amazing. She never met someone she couldn't be friends with. Every human had dignity to her. Truly inspirational. She passed this on to her kids and grandkids, and I'm thankful for this lesson. My daughters are kind mostly because of my wife, but in large part because it was exampled to us over generations. Third, being present in every moment. She was always fully in the moment, whether she was folding clothes or hiking through New York City in awe. She loved her life. You could see her presence when she got down to play with my kids on the floor as a 90-plus-year-old great-grandmother. She played checkers with my girls, tickled them, held them, loved on them, tea parties galore. She never felt pressure to move faster as she embraced every moment, especially with her family. I will never forget the tears shed every time she would have to go back to Florida after being around us for a month at Christmas. Fourth, kids are a blessing. As mentioned earlier, she loved kids, not just mine, but all the kids in her family. She treasured them and saw them for the blessing that they were to her and our family. She loved us deeply throughout our lives at all stages and in all seasons. She saw the value of being present with us and our kids. And it has paid off with her kids, grandkids, great-grandkids who adore her even to this day. Fifth, you're never too old to play. She played with us as kids and has played endlessly with our kids. It was never too much to drop whatever chore she had going to spend time goofing off with any of us. It's truly remarkable to have a woman who was born in the Great Depression create deep and meaningful connections through play over several generations. Sixth, work hard always. This woman went to bed so late because she didn't want to miss any fun. She relentlessly served her family. She was always helping with laundry, cleaning up, reorganizing, stepping up where needed, changing diapers, wiping tears, fixing injuries, folding clothes, traveling across the country to love on her kids, vacuuming, cooking, and everything in between. She found dignity in any kind of work, and she never complained about any of it. It was her duty. Even it was her delight. Number 7, go on adventures. Into her early 90s, this was a woman who sought adventure. Sometimes that was imagining a beautiful world with a 4-year-old pushing her on a swing. Other times it was traveling across the world to see a bucket list item at the top of a volcano in Hawaii or the Empire State Building. She would walk forever, never complaining of being tired. And I'd never really understood how she did it all, to be completely honest. She was one of a kind. She was always a yes when you asked her to do stuff with you. 8th, don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. She believed in us so staunchly. To a fault, really. I'm not sure she ever thought I could do any wrong, unless it was across my dad, she was relentlessly loyal to and supported no matter what. Hearing her cheer you on was a kind of motivation that wasn't contrived. It was a true belief in our ability to accomplish what we'd set our minds and hearts to do. She always encouraged us to walk in faith, and when we would, God would show up and take care of the details. Just give it everything you had. Number 9, love your family almost irrationally. She irrationally loved all of us. It always struck me how emotionally distraught she was when she had to leave us after a time with us on a trip or visiting us from Florida. Her family was her life. I think it was a good view into how the Lord views us. Despite our many faults, He sees us as His workmanship. And I think my grandma saw all the potential in us as well. She couldn't have been more proud of us, constantly telling us so. She would fawn over us all the time. Sometimes it seemed as if she was laying it on pretty thick, but it was always genuine. I think about the time that I was first inaugurated to the Missouri House of Representatives, and she got to come to the inaugural ball, and just the smile on her face, getting to walk down the grand staircase with us as a family to highlight my first term in office as a House member, just glowing. And it could have been me walking down a set of stairs volunteering at my church. She would have been the same way, same proud grandma walking to see what we were up to and what we were accomplishing. She was amazing like that. 10. Don't ever tell Papa no. We knew not to talk back to Grandpa. Discipline was always on the front burner if needed. She believed in right and wrong and would tell you her thoughts on it when necessary. But more than anything, she honored her husband and appreciated his leadership. Better to not cross that line. You were fortunate if you did so with her, though, because she solved that quickly with more grace. But that lesson was really only taught to us once. The message was clear. Discipline was very important, and we knew it, and so we stayed in line. 11th, and lastly, love unconditionally. I've not been around many people who loved us as deeply as my grandmother did. She loved her parents and siblings so deeply and was connected with them throughout her life in a beautiful way. They survived the Great Depression together, and they knew they needed each other. She married a man who didn't have much and was in the military. He was deployed for a time early in their relationship. He drank heavily and smoked for a long time. He had a hot temper. She obsessed over him, and eventually he came to know Jesus as his Lord and Savior. And it's in large part because of the grace and love my grandmother showed towards him. That graciousness and caring flooded over to anyone and everyone. What a gem she was for 92 plus years. An amazing lesson to love unconditionally, just as we've been loved unconditionally. Thank you, Granny, for everything. Thank you so much for everything, Granny. And let me just leave you with a poem my wife wrote to honor her life. And a little backstory. My wife and her had a really sweet, beautiful relationship. And they didn't really have to have this sweet, beautiful relationship. You know, grandmothers, most of them are, some of them are terrific, some of them are not. I don't know. But my grandmother had a sweet relationship with my wife. And she knew her before I did. They would travel to New York City together with my sister and my father before I even met Amy. And my grandmother just took to Amy, and they had a really special relationship. And so to hear this poem that my wife wrote about my grandmother, when I first read it, just made me cry. And so I hope I can make through it. But it encapsulates my grandmother so incredibly well. And so I wanted to share it as a legacy item at the end of this podcast episode on the 11 lessons my grandma taught me. And it's titled The Next Adventure. And it goes like this. Quick and spry with a twinkle in her eye, always ready for the next adventure. She was New York skyline, tea parties time after time, the extraordinary or the ordinary, an adventure. Always present in play or the task of the day, never complaining at the lack of adventure. Relishing baby snuggles and toddler toys, celebrating each family's big and small joys. Her family was her favorite adventure. Christmas letters and pictures, keepsake ornaments and small treasures. She kept her memories so close, her adventures. For life is joy and it is pain. She was acquainted deeply with each refrain, of quiet joy and heart-rending pain, yet able to still see adventure. And this we remember, with love and ache this September, as Granny flew to her next adventure. We love you, Doris Mae Fitzwater.